Tattoo artists, what is the most uncomfortable job you've had? Been piercing for nearly 10 years. Now, one time, I had a rather elderly gentleman come in. He was in his 70s, wore a pink 3-button polo shirt, khaki shorts, and golf shoes. He was in need of a jewelry changeout, as his old jewelry was old and tarnishing. He had his Prince Albert stretched to a diameter of 9/16 of an inch, and it had essentially caused the urethral lining to pucker out of his piercing and pissing holes. Quick change out and clean up, and he was on his way out the door. As he was leaving, he asked for my name as he put his hand out for a shake. I told him my name, and he replies, "Nice to meet you, I'm Dick." At this point, I lost it and started to laugh so hard I cried. He realized his folly and laughed with me. I'll never forget that.
That's a memorable encounter. A guy in his 70s needing a jewelry change sounds unexpected enough. When he introduced himself as Dick after you helped him out, that must have been a funny moment. It's great how a simple conversation can turn into something to remember. Moments like that definitely stick with you. You can't plan for those kinds of laughs.
I was getting a tattoo, and this big homeless-looking guy walks in. He looks at me, my artist, and takes his shirt off. He turns around and shows us the dragon tattoo that is half complete on his back. He then looks at my artist and says, "Can you make that into like a fire truck or something?" My artist just exhales deeply, as I can guess this guy does this a lot or something, and says, "Give me a few minutes to finish this up."
That's an interesting encounter. I've seen some odd things in tattoo shops too. Once I was waiting and a guy came in with a half-done piece wanting it to be a totally different design. The artist looked a bit annoyed but handled it well. People have wild ideas about their body art, I guess. It's all part of the experience in those places.
I am a shop owner, and about a week ago a 20-something guy came in and said he wanted a tattoo that day. We were completely booked for the day, but one of our artists talked to him about what he wanted and scheduled him an appointment for the next day. He said he wanted RIP, full name, with a wax drug bag next to it. Okay, a little weird, but not the strangest request. He leaves a deposit for his appointment and makes a comment that money is no object. About an hour after he leaves, a police officer comes in. He said he was looking for this guy because his girlfriend wanted them to do a welfare check on him because she was afraid he was suicidal. Turns out the name the kid wanted in his tattoo was his name. So, R.I.P, his name. We were told they were going to continue looking for him, but if he came in for his appointment the next day to call them. He didn't come in for his appointment. I hope that he got the help he needed, and I saved his deposit for him if he ever comes back.
It's a crazy world sometimes. Had that guy come in, seemed fine, but then the police show up looking for him. Just goes to show you never really know what someone is going through. Kind of eerie how he wanted a tattoo of his own name with RIP. It's good you saved his deposit. Hopefully, he gets the help he needs. Just a reminder that we should check in on our friends more often.
At a shop in Los Angeles years ago, getting some work done, asked the same question to the piercing lady. She said a guy comes in regularly, full business attire, 3-piece suite, briefcase, Oxford's a real Patrick Bateman type. The first time in he wants to get his dick pierced. So he goes to disrobe, and from his waist to his mid-thigh, he is covered in Disney tattoos. Like covered. Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, Pluto, the whole gang. He also already has a dick piercing. Actually, he is close to a dozen. After his initial visit, he came in every few months to add a dick ring or Disney character. She said he was the weirdest client she's ever had.
I once heard about a guy who was super serious looking, always in a suit, but had this wild side. He walked into a piercing shop, and his lower body was like an odd Disney art gallery. I mean, full coverage with characters all over. The piercing lady thought he was the weirdest client. It's funny how appearances can be so misleading, right? You never really know what's going on beneath the surface.
I was getting a tattoo a couple months ago, and my friend came with me because he was thinking of doing some work himself and wanted to check the whole process out. He's asking the artist a bunch of questions, and he finally got to the big one. He leans in close and goes, "What's the weirdest shit you've ever tattooed on someone?" We got two really good ones. Well, the first paid job I ever had was a bunch of stars coming out of a girl's ass crack. I also did one where a guy wanted his girlfriend's name on his arm. That's not the bad part. They had already broken up.
Sounds like a typical day at the tattoo parlor. My friend's curious nature made things awkward, but it was funny to hear the artist's stories. The star's tattoo definitely takes the cake for weird, but the guy with the ex's name? That's a tough spot to be in. Just shows how sometimes people don't think ahead before getting inked.
My friend is a tattoo artist and had some trashy lady and her gangster-looking boyfriend come and wanting nasty-ass tattooed across her back because it was her boyfriend's pet name for her. My friend refused to do it. After some debate, she told them that if she still wanted the tattoo in a year, she'd do it for half off, thinking the problem was likely to take care of itself. A year later, there they are again. Reluctantly, she relented after explaining this would be hard to remove, hard to cover up, and reminding her that it was legit permanent. 2 weeks later, she was back wanting it covered up because they broke up.
It's funny how some people make choices without really thinking about them. My friend really tried to help her out by pushing the decision, but sometimes, you can't save someone from a bad idea. In the end, it just shows how quickly things can change. That tattoo was a reminder of a relationship that didn't last. I guess that's why you should think twice before getting something so permanent.
Last time I was getting a tattoo, I asked my artist this question. Apparently, at least once a year, someone tries to get the tip of their dick tattooed. He apparently has an $800 flat fee and a $300 ball handling fee with a no refunds policy. Earn it or burn it, so to speak. Apparently, a guy tried and lasted about half an inch of the first line and bailed. Artists made $1,100 for 5 minutes of prep work and 1 second of actual tattoo time.
That's kind of wild. I can't imagine anyone actually going through with that. It's funny how some people have no limits when it comes to tattoos. The idea of a ball handling fee is something else, too. Can't blame the artist for setting those rules, though. Easy money for a pretty tough gig. I wonder if anyone's ever gone back after bailing.
My ex-husband is a tattoo artist. He had this older lady that would regularly come in and get work done. She eventually asked for the hip bone/panty line tattoo, roses and guns, I think. I got the privilege of being in the room while ex-hubby did the tat. Every time he LD touched her with the gun, she would immediately tense up and then let out a huge queef as she was untensing.
That sounds like a wild experience. I can't imagine being in that room, just trying to keep it cool while something like that happens. It's a bit awkward but also kind of funny. People have their own ways of reacting to pain, I guess. You never really know what kind of stories you'll witness when you're around artists and their clients. Just another day in that world.
I used to work with this guy who wanted to be a tattoo artist so bad, but he was horrible at it. He had his own gun and ink and would get off work and tattoo himself at home. His arms were covered with these incredibly shitty, not at all straight line stars, clovers, other little shitty symbols like that. Then he'd come into work and show them off and make fun of me because I never paid less than $300 for a tattoo. It was always awkward and uncomfortable for me.
Sounds like that guy really believed in his art, despite it not being very good. It's kind of bold to tattoo himself like that, though. I guess everyone has different ideas of what looks nice. It's funny how he would make fun of you for getting quality work. Just goes to show that some people don't appreciate the difference between amateur and professional talent.
Dated a body piercer. Used to help when I could cuz she ran the shop alone. Was afraid of being robbed, I think. Anyway, she was giving a girl a tongue piercing, and we had gone through the normal stuff. Do you have seizures, heart problems, allergic to metals or latex, do you or blah blah blah. Well, the moment she puts the needle though this girl's tongue, she has a full-on seizure. My GF is panicking, Mom, I think, and friends are panicking. I'm trying to remain calm and think of what the fuck to do. Mom faints and hits her head on a counter, bleeding everywhere. I tell my GF to deal with that. I take my belt off and wrap it around this girl to keep her arms at her sides. I make her friend hold it tight. I manage to steady her head and quickly pull out the needle. Left the clamps there cause fuck that noise. After she stops and comes to, she tells us this has happened before at a place down the street.
That was a wild situation. I can picture the chaos, with everyone panicking. It sounds pretty intense trying to keep calm in such a crisis. The girl having a seizure, and then the mom fainting must have made it even crazier. It's good you were there to help out, especially with the girl. Not something you expect to deal with in a piercing shop for sure. Just a day in the life, I guess.
This happened when I was an apprentice. Some woman came in and wanted "Heart is everything" in the Disney font. The tattoo was huge and on her entire side. She had it printed out, and my artist had stenciled it, and I had prepped the station. Well, he was tattooing her, and I realized that everything was spelled incorrectly. He hadn't gotten to it yet. So I frantically told him that he needed to go smoke a cigarette with me. After a great deal of nagging, he went out to smoke with me and was pretty pissed off about it. I told him about the incorrect spelling, and he basically shat bricks. We went in and talked to this woman about it. And even after explaining that it was spelled incorrectly, she insisted that was how it had to be.
That's a wild story. It's crazy how some people can be about their tattoos. You'd think they'd want it right. It's good that you caught it before it was too late. The artist must have been stressed, but at least you both got to take a break and discuss it. It's just one of those moments that sticks with you, especially when it involves something permanent like that.
I asked the guy who was tattooing me the same question. He said he tattooed a fly on this guy's penis, and the weeks following his appointment the guy would pop his head in and say he doubled his money and then would leave again. Finally, the tattoo artist stopped him and asked what he meant. Turns out he would be sitting at the bar and would make bets with people who didn't believe he had a fly tattooed on his dick. He'd win every time and doubled the money it took him to get the thing in the first place with each bet.
That's a wild story. I guess some people will go to great lengths for a good bet. It's funny how a tattoo can turn into a money-making scheme. Makes you think about the lengths people will go to for attention or validation. I wonder if he still bets with that tattoo or if he moved on to something else. Either way, it's a memorable experience for both him and the tattoo artist.
I'm no tattoo artist, but one time a tattoo artist walked into a bar and just yelled, "Who can draw?" and half-heartedly raised my hand and shrugged out a "Yeah, I guess I can." And the guy says, "All right, come with me then." So next thing I know, I follow this dude to a party, cracks open a few beers, asked if I ever tatted someone before, and I said no. And he said, "Well, you're about to." So we partied and got drunk, then he had me cover up a gang tattoo with a grenade after my whole 5-minute crash course into tattooing.
That's wild. Sounds like a typical night that spiraled out of control. Just hanging out, and then suddenly you're tattooing someone. A gang tattoo, no less. Bet that adrenaline was something else, especially doing it with no real experience. 5 minutes of instruction isn't much, but sometimes you just jump into things. Hope it turned out okay. Definitely a memorable introduction to tattooing for sure.
I actually just got inked today and asked my artist this question. His answer: a 17-year-old kid wanted to get "fuck pigs and kill cops" on his hands. Where we are, that statement couldn't be more out of place. Naturally, the artist refused as it reflects poorly on him and the shop if the kid spread it around, and the kid would never get a job with that, let alone making himself a target to be hassled by the cops even more. That, and he tried to pay in quarters.
That's an interesting story. It's wild how some people don't think about the long-term consequences of their choices. The artist had a solid point. Getting something like that inked could definitely come back to haunt you. Plus, trying to pay in quarters is just a strange move. Seems like the kid wasn't really considering how things would play out in the real world. Makes you wonder about what some people are thinking.
Tattoo artist and long-time Reddit lurker. I actually made an account just to comment this. I would have to say my weirdest situation ever would be. I come from a pretty small town. Lots of shitty tattoos. Tribal and ducks unlimited symbols. No yo. Anyway, I had once been requested to do 2 similar Browning symbols for a man and a female, one with a bow and one original, with scripture around it. I unfortunately can't remember the exact passage, but it was basically something off-putting about the woman's bosom. Amy Way, as I was doing the woman's tattoo, on her inner hip, V area, her boyfriend or husband, whatever was hovering over me the whole time, remarking on how hot it was for me to have been touching her there. Ugh. It was so creepy in Westboro Baptist Church, like, haha.
That definitely sounds uncomfortable. I can imagine how distracting it must have been to have someone hovering and commenting like that. Tattoos are personal, and having someone there making awkward remarks can really throw off the vibe. It's wild how some people's requests can lead to strange situations. I guess in small towns, you run into all kinds of characters. Thanks for sharing that experience.
I worked at a pharmacy as a lab technician, and a 13-year-old girl and her dad come over to bring some prescriptions. Looking at my earrings, he asked where I got my ears pierced. I went to Ardeen, an equivalent to Claire's, and had such a bad experience with terrible infections that I begged the father to bring his daughter to a professional piercer, where everything is proper and well done. He said he was too scared to bring his daughter to this kind of place, didn't trust these kinds of people, and preferred Claire's. I was really tempted to unprofessionally answer, "Why the fuck do you ask for my opinion if you don't give a crap?"
It's pretty wild how some people just ignore good advice. I mean, you're trying to help, and they still stick with what they know, even if it's not the best choice. It's a lot like when someone asks for my opinion on games but just goes with the usual stuff anyway. Makes you wonder why they asked in the first place. I guess everyone has their own comfort zone.
There's a good memoir called Tattoo Machine where the writer, Jeff Johnson, relates once an obese woman walked into his shop and she wanted a portrait of her childhood self tattooed on her stomach, without a mouth. And that's the creepiest one that he left in. He admits leaving one out before telling that one.
That's an interesting story. It shows how personal tattoos can be and how they often carry deeper meanings for people. A portrait without a mouth adds a layer of complexity, hinting at something more than just appearance. It's fascinating how someone can choose to commemorate a moment from their past in such a unique way. Makes you think about the stories behind tattoos and what they represent.
One of our artists was tattooing a college gal a few weeks ago, while her friend stood, chatted, and watched. The friend was mid-sentence, and all of a sudden, we all hear a loud bang. The friend fainted and just hit the floor. Once she came to, I walked her over to the bed I tattoo on. I had no appointments that day. I had her lay down and gave her some water. She drank that, her soda, and ate some snacks out of her bag, and we made sure that she would not be the one driving them back up to campus. The whole thing was weird. She said she didn't really have a history of fainting. I don't know how anyone here would have handled a customer owing mid-tattoo. Sounds pretty traumatizing.
That's an interesting story. People reacting unexpectedly can change the vibe in a flash. It's good that you were there to help her out when she fainted. Making sure she was okay and not driving was smart. It's strange how the body reacts sometimes. Fainting in that situation must have been quite a shock for everyone. Glad it ended with her feeling better.
Similar story. I was getting my sleeve outlined. This dude walks in with his bicep and shoulder bandage. He asks my artist if she could touch up his newly acquired tattoo. So my artist says, sure. Let me take a look. So the guy pulls off the bandage to show this tribal version of a dragon on his arm. But it's all fucked up. It looked like someone took a cheese grater to this guy's arm. My artist immediately asked when and where he got it. Apparently, it was a garage tattoo that his friend did, and there was nothing my artist could do because obviously it wasn't healed all the way through. It was terrible. I couldn't even look at the thing.
That sounds rough. I've seen some bad tattoos too. One time, a guy at the shop had this really messed up portrait of a dog. It was so off that it looked like a completely different animal. He thought it was funny, but the artist just shook his head. Guess some people don't realize how important it is to go to a pro. The stories you hear at tattoo shops can be pretty wild.
The mall near where I'm living has an ad outside of their piercing station that has a baby with an earring and discounts for parents. I really want to kick it down. My mom tried to have my ears pierced when I was a baby and my dad shut that down, saying that she should at least wait until I can say if I want them or not. I still don't have any piercings. It just ain't my thing. My mom was pissed at my dad for not letting her do that though. She wouldn't have remembered it, and then when she got older she'd just be used to having earrings, and then I could get her cute earrings and blah blah blah. I guess I got lucky that my parents at least listened when I was old enough to talk and said I didn't want piercings. I've heard stories of parents forcing their 5-plus-year-old daughters to get their piercings while they screamed they didn't want them. All in all, I super respect you for not doing that. That stuff's messed up.
It's good your parents let you decide. That ad with the baby is just weird though. I get that some parents think it looks cute or whatever. But forcing kids into piercings is messed up. I've seen kids crying and the parents just don't care. Your dad had the right idea. It's nice when parents actually listen and let you choose what you want for yourself, especially with things like that.
It was kind of surprising how many of them consider themselves artists first and tattoo people second and find the job really monotonous until someone comes in wanting something spectacular or something they can just run wild with. Well, they're putting art on people's body, and it takes years and years of practice to master. So I think it's fair to call oneself an artist first in that field. I'm a cook and I love my job, but there's still monotonous aspects of it. A love or passion for what you do doesn't change the pace of it.
I get that. A lot of professions have that routine side, even if you love what you do. In tattooing, it must feel refreshing when someone brings in an exciting design. I guess it's similar to cooking. Sometimes you're just making the same dishes over and over, but then a new recipe comes along that sparks your creativity. It's all about finding those moments that break the monotony.
It was kind of surprising how many of them consider themselves artists first and tattoo people second. Well, it's honestly the most accurate way of looking at it. They're just as much of an artist as a sculptor, a painter, a 3D modeler, anyone. They just work with a different medium. Edit. Holy shit, I did not expect this to blow up. I did not mean this in a rude way whatsoever. Tattooing is both technically challenging and also aesthetically challenging. It takes true skill, talent, passion, and hard work to become a great tattoo artist. They've earned that name for a reason.
Yeah, it's interesting how people see tattoo artists. They put in a lot of work to develop their skills, just like any other artist. My friend got a tattoo a few years back, and the artist really put thought into the design. It was clear they cared about the art as much as the person getting it. It's a unique form of expression that doesn't get enough credit sometimes.
Not gonna lie, I have a similar story. In college, I come home, roommate is throwing a massive party, which is normal for our house. Anyways, I'm in the middle of my normal get-home routine, smoke a cig, grab a beer, take a shit. Well, I get to number 3, walk into the restroom, and I guess a home piercer decided to set up shop in my bathtub and was piercing this random girl's nipples. I go to leave said bathroom to find another to take my post-cig/beer shit. But the girl tells me I can't leave as she needs a second opinion on the piercings when they're done. So I just hung out in there and waited them to finish. It was an interesting party.
That sounds like quite the experience. A typical college party can take unexpected turns. I remember walking into a similar situation where a buddy was hosting, and there was some improvised tattooing happening in the living room. It's wild how random moments can turn a regular night into a story you'd never forget. At least you got to witness something unique. Can't say that happens every day.
A lot. When I was still piercing, I had a lot of older women come in to get their genitals pierced in various fashions. One was an employee with the Catholic school board in town here. I went to a Catholic school that was attached to the school board in the town I live in, so I recognized her. Luckily for me, she didn't recognize me. But you'd never expect things like that from some. Some older ladies just want something fun for them and their SOs to look at.
That's a wild experience. You never expect to see someone from your past in those situations. It's interesting how some people break the mold and go for what they want. Seems like there's more to everyone than what you see on the surface. Each person's story can be surprising, especially when they decide to embrace a bit of fun for themselves. Just goes to show that life has its quirks.
My personal rule was the child had to consent to getting them done. I've seen so many of my co-workers have to hold down a screaming child because they did not want it, but mommy/daddy did. I see getting earrings done as a rite of passage. I got mine done when I was 5, and I wanted to be a big kid.
It's interesting how kids see things differently. I remember getting my ears pierced around that age too. It felt like a big deal, like I was joining a club. It's tough when parents push for things the child isn't ready for. Consent is important. Everyone should have a say in decisions about their own body, especially kids. They need to feel in control, or it just turns into a bad experience.
Please stand your ground. I worked at Eclair's store, icing. If your daughters are against it, there is no way you should push it on them. Especially since there is a risk of infection due to less than stellar hygiene practices. All they do is wipe the table with an alcohol wipe the gun with another wipe, and wipe the person's ears. The guns are just wiped down between people. It's appalling. Spending the extra money on a legit shop is so much better.
I remember a friend who had a similar experience getting her ears pierced at a popular store. She was super nervous, but the staff rushed her through it without proper care. A few weeks later, she ended up with an infection, and it took ages to heal. Now she only goes to professional places. It made her realize that some things are worth spending more on, especially health and safety.
It's difficult to say. I don't want to talk poorly about that particular artist, who I personally believe has a great deal of talent. But I can say that the shop we were at was in a rough part of town, and the target clientele were getting $40 to $70 tattoos. The times were rough for all of us during that period, and I'd seen folks take some pretty questionable clients just to have a few bucks in the wallet at the end of the day. I've seen artists tattoo drunk people, let apprentices, never myself, however, tattoo people who admitted to having HIV and other bloodborne diseases and do white power/gang related ink. I will add that despite the tough times/tough measure situation, the craftsmanship was top notch, and all of the artists in my hood tattoo shop took a great deal of pride in what they did. So I guess heart really is everything.
It's interesting to see how people adapt when times get tough. I remember a friend who worked at a tattoo shop in a rough area. They would take on a lot of questionable clients just to make ends meet. Despite the challenges, the artists really cared about their work. It showed that even in tough situations, the passion and skill can shine through, regardless of who they were tattooing.
My daughter is 17 and wants to get her ears done, but we have different last names. I remarried after her dad, and they want proof we are related. Apparently looking like a young clone of me doesn't count. They even said, "We know you're her mom, but we have to have the paperwork." So I have to bring in her birth certificate, my divorce paperwork, and new marriage certificate. She needs a picture ID. It's a pain, but I admire their dedication to consent. Edit. This is a highly recommended tattoo/piercing shop. They are not allowed to perform anything on anyone under 18 without parental consent, or they lose their license. Both of us are okay with jumping through a few hoops, so she can wear some.
It's kind of wild how strict places can be about documentation. You'd think a resemblance would be enough. But I guess they're just covering their bases. It's good they're serious about consent, especially with minors. Honestly, it seems like a hassle to gather all that paperwork, but if you're both on board, it'll be worth it in the end. Plus, it'll be a memorable experience for her.
Absolutely. My husband wanted to have my daughter's ears pierced when she was an infant. Latino family. They traditionally pierce girls' ears, but he supported my decision against it. But people won't know she's a girl. They protested. I know she's a girl, and that's good enough for me. I also don't mind politely correcting someone if they mistake her for a boy. Still happens occasionally, even though she's older now. Waiting for her to ask for piercings is a great lesson on controlling what goes on in your body, as well as a lesson in responsibility. She'll have to earn the money for the earring / trip to the studio. It'll be your job to keep them clean, keep track of the studs, etc. I've never had pierced ears, so I thought it might be a nice bonding moment for us to go get them together when she's older.
That sounds like a solid approach. It's definitely good to let kids make choices about their own bodies when they're ready. The whole idea of waiting for her to ask shows respect for her autonomy. Plus, turning it into a bonding moment later on is a nice way to create a memory together. All in all, it seems like a balanced way to handle it, respecting both traditions and personal choice.
I got my ears pierced at Claire's when I was 15. After the requisite amount of time, I went to take them out, and they wouldn't budge. My mom tried, my aunt tried, almost every family member and friend had a shot at it. Eventually we went to the doctor, and they cut them off with what looked like very thin wire cutters. I was so scared to get my ears pierced again after that mess. There's no way I would take my child to a place like that.
I can see why you'd be hesitant after that experience. Getting your ears pierced should be simple, but sometimes things go wrong. It's tough when a fun moment turns into a stressful situation. I get not wanting to repeat that with your kid. You just want to keep them safe, you know? Better to find a more reliable place if you decide to go for it again.
It is. Honestly, I got my ears pierced at a place like Claire's when I was 11 or so, and the earrings were so tiny and shoddy and cheap that one managed to work its way, rather painfully I might add, through the hole that they had pierced while I was sleeping. I woke up with blood pouring from the hole because it had torn a bunch of flesh and was stuck, and my parents weren't able to get it out. It took a trip to the doctor to fix it, and the earring back was somehow stuck. It was nightmare-inducing, and then my parents put them right back in. Thanks, Mom.
That sounds rough. I remember getting my ears pierced when I was a kid too. It was supposed to be a fun thing, but just like you, it turned into a whole drama. I'd end up at the doctor just to get things sorted out. It's wild how something so simple can turn into a bad experience. Your parents putting them back in is a classic move. I guess they really wanted you to have earrings.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.